Okay, last but not least tonight, we have someone who's just come back from India and has been doing fieldwork in India for the past semester and is going to share that with us. That's Jensen Martin. The title of his project is The Hidden Gems of Narasimha, an experiential search for the essential myth of the lion-headed god.
Ugram Viram Mahavishnim Valantam Sarvatomukham Narasimham Vishanam Bhadram Mrityor Mrityam Namami Aham. This is the Narasimha Mahamantra. It invokes the presence and the blessing of Narasimha. And it means you are who are the most ferocious, the most courageous, the all-pervasive Vishnu, the form of fire, who has his face everywhere in all directions, who is the form of a lion man, who is terrific and auspicious, who is the death of death. I bow down and revere you. So, before this presentation, I'll read for you a brief version of the Narasimha myth so you understand who we're talking about and why I even started this whole thing. Long ago in the Satya Yuga, the mighty king Hiranyakasipu performed severe austerities. After 100,000 years, Brahma, pleased with his tapas, granted Hiranyakasipu boon. Hiranyakasipu had only one wish: inviolability from all beings and immortality. Neither gods nor men nor beast may kill me, neither by arrows nor missile, nor by wet nor by dry, neither by night nor by day, nor by within or without may I be slain. I will become the sun, the moon, the wind, fire, the rain, the god of all, the king of all the devas. Brahma said, so be it, and returned to his abode. Terrified of what was to come, the gods assembled and begged Brahma to please change his mind. Brahma replied, the fruit of his tapas must be obtained, but at the end of his tapas, Vishnu shall become his conqueror. Hiranyakasipu, now all-powerful, oppressed the triple world. He harassed the sages in their hermitages, he vanquished the gods in heaven, and brought all of the realms under his control. The gods sought shelter with Lord Vishnu, and he finally promised them a swift end to Hiranyakasipu's reign. Having given his word, the Blessed One Vishnu went to Hiranyakasipu at dusk. Having made his form half man and half lion, he shone like a golden mountain adorned by a mass of flames. His powerful body looked like burning coals, and his tongue quivered like the lightning of the cloud at the destruction of the world. Appearing from within a great stone pillar, shattering the assembly hall, and slaying the king's army, Vishnu himself, the raging man-lion, seized Hiranyakasipu, and swiftly placing him upon his lap, tore open the demon's chest with his claws, leaving him lifeless. Having thus worshipped Vishnu Narasimha, the gods returned to heaven, and the man-lion form of the god vanished. Pretty powerful story. When I first heard it, I was deeply moved. I saw in this story a rare form of God as an extraordinary and fantastic display of divine intervention. So for this thesis, informed by the tools that I developed through the master's program, I wanted to know if there was some way that I could myself experience in a tangible way the presence of Narasimha in some way that could impact my personal life experiences and then empower me to contribute to helping other people suffer. So using my own personal methodology that combined embodied practice of bhakti yoga, chanting, and japa with textual analysis, I went off to India to follow the tracks of the great sages and see if I could receive my own darshan, or holy vision of Narasimha. So I first arrived January 4th to Calcutta, making a pilgrimage to the famous Dakshinaswar Kali temple, where I meditated in a small room where Ramakrishna had meditated as a young man, practicing there a Narasimha mantra and asking for his blessings on my trip. I then headed to the Kumbh Mela, an indescribably large gathering of millions of people for the purpose of pilgrimage to the three rivers of the Sangam, the Ganges, the Yamuna, and the Saraswati. I stayed there for a whole month amid crowds of sadhus, devotees, tourists, and wanderers, meditating and bathing daily in the water. And so I'm going to describe the pictures as I go, and so you can see, I tried my best to capture it in the photos, but it doesn't do it justice. There's this milling, throbbing crowd of people, and one's at night, and this is actually the very early morning, and then one's in the middle of the day. And no matter what time you go, there's always people just surrounding you. And then on the top left, I kind of had a little spot to myself. And on the bottom right, you see a yogi sitting among his dung fire doing some form of tapas. And so, yeah, this is good. So then on one occasion, I received a Narasimha mantra from a Naga Baba, and soon after, I became violently ill after eating this contaminated prasad that I ate from the river. The illness was terrible, and it lasted even till now, but it was a tapasya. It was a tapasya that opened the door for a mystical dream later, where I felt like I was greeted by an emissary of Narasimha and led to his own altar. And I have
Nrsinga. Nrsinga is God of Vishnu. God of Vishnu. God of Vishnu.
I see. It's pretty chaotic, but that pretty much captures the Kumbh Mela. And I'll repeat for you what the sadhu said. Om Narasimhaya Vidmahi Vajranakaya Dhimahi Tano Simha Prachodayat. And this is the Narasimha Gayatri mantra. And even though he's just a naked old man, he's actually a Naga Baba. And because of his life's austerity, he has this holy power to grant mantra initiation. Completing my period at the Kumbh Mela, I went to the jungle, the mountainous jungles of Ahobilam. This is a sacred region in South India famous for the Ugra Stambam, the granite pillar which Narasimha mythically appeared from. Guided by a fellow Narasimha devotee who led me on my travels, I was brought here to 9 Narasimha temples that abide in this region. So here we have the Ugra Stambam. This is the pillar that supposedly Narasimha appeared from. And the picture on the right, this is the feet on top of the mountain that represent the spot where Narasimha touched down. And then on this bottom here is another picture of this mountaintop altar with my guide, Dhruva, who was a main source for my project. And then here we have, okay, so I was brought to these 9 temples, the most famous and ancient being Ahobilam Narasimha, which is an idol that was found deep inside of the cave and said to have been left by Hiranyakashipu's son. My guide shared here countless stories of coming as a young man and encountering bears, tigers, and mythical beings. Here I was gifted with a Narasimha Murti, which I have also brought here, the worship of which is supposed to bring great rewards according to the Narasimha Purana. This Murti was specially blessed by the priests at all of the Ahobilam Narasimha temples and at every successive Narasimha temple on my trip. And so here we have me against the Narasimha pillar, and this is another picture of this Murti. And on the right, you have an ancient deity of Yoga Narasimha, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And here also some more forms of the meditating Narasimha. And in the middle, it's a little bit hard for you to tell, but the priest is leaning down to offer a garland of tulsi to this very statue. After this period in Ahobilam, I returned to Varanasi and I performed a Narasimha initiation ceremony for a group of devotees on Mahashivaratri. And then I went to South India to attend a fire ceremony dedicated to Pratyangira, which is a 1,008-headed goddess, lion-headed goddess, who is known as the mother of Narasimha in some tantric schools. And I'd been specially invited to participate in retreat with this yogi couple, Adi Shakti and Adi Yargal Shanmuga, who are world-renowned spiritual teachers. And they had offered me to take a special sadhana that would basically grant me siddhis. And This was an intense time for me that enforced much growth, and after much deliberation, I decided to not take the initiation because of previous commitment to my guru. But this here is the fire ceremony that they performed, and that's me offering sacred offerings into the fire to Pratyangira, who's depicted there on the top right, and then the top left is the specially charged Pratyangira idol. And then this is the family, and I stayed with them for 10 days learning about Pratyangira and their perspective on Narasimha. But completing my time here, I began on a personal Narasimha pilgrimage, having been led to Ahobalam by my friend and having been led on this special Pratyangira adventure. Now I was going on my own journey. And so here I visited some of the most renowned Narasimha temples in South India. All of them are places where great sages had performed long periods of tapas and received great visions of the masters. This temple here is in Vadara, called Jara Narasimha, and it is the site of a cave where you have to wade through 30 meters of waist-high water, and you can see that back there. Normally closed to visitors, the priests opened this tunnel especially for me and my fellow initiate after we chanted outside the song of 1008 names of Narasimha, approximately 30 minutes. And so this idol on the left is a special Swayambhu, they say, self-manifested deity of Narasimha after he killed some Raksha in the cave and also started this spring. And here's a couple more pilgrimage places that I went on, and I just wanted to take a second to talk about this. So you see here a couple different forms of Narasimha. On the right, he's seated in this Yoga Narasimha posture. It's very difficult to tell from your distance, but there's a strap here, and he's sitting in a meditation posture, and there's a small triangle on his chest, which indicates the presence of Lakshmi, who's the consort of Vishnu. And here, the form is a little bit hard to make out, but it's beautiful. He's sitting here with his consort Lakshmi, and he's adorned with these beautiful jasmine flowers. And then here again is another Lakshmi Narasimha from Tirupati, which some will know is I really gotta go fast. So I'm gonna fast forward through this. So after visiting several temples and having unique experiences each one, the trip came to a glorious climax when I visited the ashram of Mata Amritanandamai, the hugging saint. Amma, she's called, has been the responsible support for my entrance to the yoga program and the reason behind my interest in the Kumbh Mela. Coming to her darshan and touching her feet, I asked her all of my Narasimha questions and asked for blessing of my murti. Waiting for days for my next chance to be with her, I was finally able to come before her once again. As the line moved forward one by one, a pressure increased inside of me until I was the next person. The pressure crescendoed in a voice in my heart saying, I want Narasimha. Suddenly the attendants pulled me forward. Amma bent forward to hug me and whispered in my ear. The moment she did, I saw with my inner eye Narasimha himself fly out of her mouth and into my heart. And her next words indicated to me that I should meditate on what she gave me, for in it contained the potential to not just answer my questions about Narasimha, but to bring about my future self-realization. Since that moment, all of my temples, I was no longer visiting a Narasimha outside of me, but just visiting what I already felt inside. After a couple more weeks of pilgrimage, I stood on top of Savandurga, this mountain on the left, one of Asia's largest monoliths, and home to an ancient Narasimha temple. After taking darshan of the fierce deity, I stood on top and reflected on my trip and whether I had accomplished my goal of darshan. Even though I'd received no glorious flaming vision of Narasimha, I knew I had been incredibly blessed. No final illumination had been attained, but I gained tremendous value from the books I read, the places I visited, and most of all, the connections with new friends and masters. I realized the true value of the trip was not any dynamic illumination, but a deep sense of security in my own inner conscience, knowing that I'd use my precious moments of freedom to seek truth with all of my intensity. And that's me one more on top of that mountain where I had my final moment alone. To conclude, I learned many things about Narasimha throughout my travels that will stay with me throughout my life. I found that this god, even though originating over 30,000 years ago, still has an active community dedicated to his worship. Having a variety of forms and functions, Narasimha is especially worshipped as the god of yoga, where he used pranayama, breathing, to restrain and transmute his anger into peace. This form is called Yoga Narasimha, as shown earlier, and it's depicted here, and is worshipped especially in South India. In addition, he's also known as the supreme remover of obstacles. According to some Purana myths, Ganesh received his power of obstacles removal after worshipping Narasimha and placing his feet on his head. Especially in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Narasimha is treated as a form of Krishna and is the deity specifically tasked with guarding over bhakti yogis. In many miraculous instances that were shared with me personally, devotees recorded him giving them material support, protection, armor from enemies, and bestowing ecstatic states. And here's some more images of the Ugra Narasimha, the fierce form. In addition, he's an ancient god of Tantra, and his mantras are often specially invoked to protect from black magic or sorcery. And he is also the presiding god of Harivarsha, a subtle dimensional realm outside the earth. Though not exactly what I had desired, I believe I fulfilled the aim of my thesis to discover if Narasimha's presence could be directly encountered and experienced. These diversities of experiences that came to me all formed a comprehensive picture that have left a lasting impression in my mind of Narasimha as a tangible force that can be called on to protect and guide people through difficulties, and ultimately to the pinnacle of yogic success.
Questions for Jensen?
We did go to India.
Oh, you did? For those who haven't.
Does the Prahlad story come up much?
So there are 18 versions of the Narasimha myth in the Puranas, and probably the most recent of those is the one that places the most emphasis on Prahlad. In the earlier versions, he's not mentioned at all, and in the majority of them, Prahlad is actually an already wise man who's the general of his father's army, who has his transcendental moment of Vishnu after he sees Narasimha attack his father. And so there's the story is different all across the board, but I would say the majority of them are the ones that I consider the most authentic simply because of how many there are. Narasimha appears and evades some of the magical weapons that the army sends at him, and then he realizes this could only be an avatar of Vishnu, and then he has his spiritual awakening and tries to protect his father, and his father ignores it. But Prahlad is he's the son of Hiranyakasipu, an important figure for a lot of bhakti tradition.
When you rehearsed this, you told us a snippet about the theory that Narasimha is actually a god from a different planet or a totally different dimension. And I was just wondering if you could share a bit with us about that.
I would love to share, but do you have 30 minutes? Anyway, basically, it's part of my thesis. It's the whole end section. But in the beginning of my presentation, I said, long ago in the Satya Yuga. And it's really important to look at that because the yugas measure these cycles of Earth. And according to the Hindu calendar, we're either in the Kali Yuga or the Dwapara Yuga, which are the lowest ages. And we're interpreting these texts from a Kali or a Dwapara Yuga perspective. But if you actually read what the text says about the Satya Yuga, people are flying around, manifesting back and forth. And to quote Yogananda in his commentary from the Bhagavad Gita, he has a short little sentence where he says, in the Satya Yuga, interplanetary and interastral travel will happen not by airplanes, but by astral projection. Mm-hmm. And that's like, whoa, you could unpack that so many times over. And so I said it briefly here at the end, but Narasimha is actually the presiding god, according to the text, over Harivarsha, which is this subtle realm where humans live longer and enjoy these heavenly delights, which exactly match Yogananda's description of the astral realms and the astral planets. And here, I specifically hope someone would ask, because here's Narasimha's third eye, and he has a lot of more arms in this picture, which are features of beings in the higher realms. And there's a lot of other things that I pulled
So
from the
does
Puranas.
that mean that by worshiping Narasimha, perhaps we can bring ourselves closer to that state in which we can just manifest and astrally project around?
Maybe. I mean, like,
Would we need a yoga strap?
no, just be careful of those desires. You might just get taken there, like, wait, I'm gonna come back. What? Any more?
Have you heard the story that Hiranyakashipu, once he's killed, becomes a guard of Vaikuntha Loka? Do you
So
agree
that's,
with this
I mean,
perspective?
I don't disagree or agree with any of it, but really, like, so there's a whole thing, the Bhagavata Purana, which is the main text which the Gaudiya Vaishnavism uses to basically make Narasimha a Bhakti avatar. So like I kind of like this like fierce, old school Narasimha divine lion, but nowadays he's kind of like this gentle, compassionate form of Krishna, and that comes from the Bhagavata Purana. And in that story, Vishnu has two guardians named Jaya and Vijaya, who basically become prideful and refuse to let some sages into Vaikuntha, which is Vishnu's realm. And so they get cursed, and they get cursed to go to earth. And what happens is Vishnu tries his best to like make the curse go away, but he can't. And he says, you can go to earth in 3 evil lives or 10 good lives. And it's not like they just have 10 lifetimes. No, they have to come every time. They can only come with the avatar. And so that means they'd have to wait 10 avatar cycles. So they don't want to waste their time, so they chose the evil route. And so one of those brothers was supposedly Hiranyakasipu.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because without Hiranyakasipu basically attaining the peak of like evilness, there would be no power for the divine to come combat him.
Yes.
And so in a way, he's the greatest devotee of Vishnu because he was so bad. And he was just, it wasn't this kind of like bad, like I'm just being bad, but it was more like a challenge, like come on God, like if you're real, then you know, it's like a, come on.
I did.
Great.
Thank you, Jen.
Cool.